dear students. How are you? I hope all are you good. Welcome back to another class. Today we start English chapter number 30, A Father's Confession. Confessions allow you to discover your friends' most intimate secrets and their most embarrassing stories. If you're given chance to confess something, how to confess to someone. So read and enjoy. A father's confession is read by his born children after burial. They were expecting a standard will. Certainly not this. It ate into my mind like a fixed idea, just a cancer must eat into the flesh. It was there in my head, in my heart, in my whole body. It seemed to me and it swallowed my impi up as a wild beast might have. Learning Lag, the House of Lace burning 2009. All visors Liddell had followed the funeral procession of Mr. Badon Claremans to the grave, and the last word of the funeral oration pronounced by the delegate of the district remained in the minds of all. He was an honest man at least. An honest man he had been in all the known acts of his life, in his words, so in his examples, his attitude, his behavior, his enterprises, in the cut of his beard and the shape of his hats. So, he never had said a word that did not set an example, never had given an alms without adding a word of advice, never had extended his hand without appearing to bestow a benediction he left to children, a boy and a girl. His son was counselor general and his daughter having married a lawyer. Aptorial de la Volte moved in the best society of visors. They were inconsolable at the death of their father, for they loved him sincerely. As soon as the ceremony was over, the son, daughter, and son-in-law returned to the house of mourning and shutting themselves in the library. And they opened the will, the seals of which were to be broken by them alone, and only after the coffin had been placed in the ground. This wish was expressed by a notice on the envelope. Amporil Delevo to open the envelope in his character of a lawyer used to such operations, and having adjusted his spectacles, he in a mountainous voice made for reading the details of contracts. My children, my dear children, I could not sleep the eternal sleep in peace if I did not make to you from the tomb a confession, the confession of a crime, remorse for which was ruined my life. Yes, I committed a crime, a frightful, abominable crime. I was 26 years old and I had just been called to the bar in Paris and was living the life of young bar from the provinces who are standard in his town without acquaintances, relatives, or friends. So I took a sweetheart. There are beings who cannot live alone. I was one of those. Solitude fills me with the horrible anguish. The solitude of my room besides my fire in the evening. I feel then if I were alone on earth, alone but surrounded by vague dangers, unknown and terrible things, and a passion that separates me from my neighbor whom I do not know, keeps me at as great a distance from him as the stars that I see through my window. A sort of fever pervades me, a fever of impatience and of fear, and the silence of the walls terrifies me. The silence of a room where one lives alone is so intense and so melancholy. It is not only silence of the mind. When a piece of furniture cracks, a shudder goes through you, for you expect no noise in this melancholy abode. So how many times, nervous and timid from his motionless silence, I have begun to talk, to repeat words without rhyme or reason, only to make some sound my voice. At those times sounds so strange that I am afraid of that too. Is there anything more dreadful than thinking to oneself in an empty house? So what's voice sounds like that of another, an unknown voice talking aimlessly to no one into the empty air, with no ear to listen to it. For no one knows before they escape into the solitude of the room exactly what words will be uttered, and when they sound lugubriously in the silence, they seem no more than an echo, the peculiar echo of words whispered by one's thought. My sweetheart was a young girl like other young girls who live in Paris on vague ways that are insufficient to keep them. She was gentle, good, simple. Her parents lived at Poissy. She went to spend several days with them from time to time. For a year, I lived quietly with her fully decided to leave her when I should find someone whom I liked well enough to marry. I would make a little provision for this one, for it is an understood thing in our social set that a woman's love should be paid for in money if she is poor, in presents if she is rich. But one day she told me she was ancient. I was thunderstruck and saw in a second that my life would be ruined. I saw the fetter than I should wear until my death, everywhere in my future family life, in my old days. Forever the fetter of a woman bound to my life, to a child, the fetter of the child whom I must bring up, watch over, protect, while keeping myself unknown to him and keeping him hidden from the world. I was greatly disturbed at this news, and a confused longing, a criminal desire surged through my mind. I did not formulate it, but I felt in my heart, ready to come to the surface as if someone hidden behind a um, porter should await the signal to come out. If some accident might only happen, so many of these little wings die before they are born. Oh, I did not wish my sweetheart to die, the poor girl. I loved her very much, but I wished possibly that the child might die before I saw it. He was born. I set up housekeeping in my little bachelor apartment, an imitation home with a horrible child. He looked like our children. I did not care for him. Fathers, you see, do not show affection until later. They have not the instinctive and passionate tenderness of mothers. Their affection has to be awakened gradually. Their mind must become attached by bonds formed each day between beings that live in each other's society. A year passed. I now avoided my home, which was too small wares, or lined in baby clothes and stockings the size of gloves, were lying around where 1,000 articles of all descriptions lay on the furniture, on the arm of an easy chair. Everywhere I went out cheaply that I might not hear the child cry. So, for he cried on the slightest pretext, when he was bathed, when he was touched, um, when he was put to bed, when he was taken up in the morning. Incessantly, I had made a few acquaintances, and I met at a reception the woman who was to be our mother. I fell in love with her and became desirous to marry her. I courted her. I asked her parents consent to our marriage, and it was granted. So I found myself in this dilemma. I must either marry this young girl whom I adored, having a child already, or else sting the truth and renounce her and happiness, my future, everything. For her parents, who were people of rigid principles, would not give her to me if they knew. So I passed a month of horrible anguish, of mortal torture, a mouth haunted by 1,000 frightful thoughts, and I felt developing in me a hatred toward my son, toward that little morsel of living, screaming flesh who blocked my path, interrupted my life, condemned me to an existence without hope, without all those vague acceptations that make the charm of ye. But just then my companion's mother became ill, and I was left alone with the child. It was in December and the weather was terribly cold. What a night! My companion had just left. I had dined alone in my little dining room, and I walked gently into the room where the little one was asleep. I sat down in an armchair before the fire. The wind was blowing, making the windows rattle, a dry, frosty wind, and I saw through the window the stars shining with that piercing brightness that they have on frosty nights. Then the idea that had obsessed me for a month rose again to the surface as soon as I was quiet. It came to me and harassed me. It had into my mind like a fixed idea, just as cancers must eat into the flesh. It was there in my head, in my heart, in my whole body, it seemed to me, and it swallowed me up as wild beasts might have and endeavored to drive it away. So to repulse it, to open my mind to other thoughts as one opens a window, to the fresh morning breeze to drive out the vitiated air, but I could not drive it from my brain, not even for a second. I do not know how to express this torture. It gnawed at my soul, and I felt that frightful pain, a real physical and moral pain. My life was ruined. How could I escape from this situation? How could I draw back, and how could I confess? And I loved the one who was to become your mother with a mad passion, which this insurmountable obstacle only aggravated. A terrible rag was taking possession of me, choking me, a rage that verged on madness. Surely I was crazy. That evening, the child was sleeping. I got up and looked at it. As it slept, it was this abortion, this swap response. There's nothing that condemned me to irremediable unhappiness. He was asleep, his mouth upon wrapped in his bedclothes in a crib besides my bed where I could not sleep. So, how did I ever do what I do? How do I know what force urged me on? What malevolent power took possession of me? Oh, the temptation to crime came to me without any forewarning. All I recall is that my heart beat tumultuously. It beat so hard that I could hear it as one hears the strokes of a hammer behind a partition. That is all I can recall the beating of my heart. In my head, there was a strange confusion, a tumult, a senseless disorder, a lack of presence of mind. It was one of those hours of bewilderment and hallucination when a man is neither conscious of his action nor able to guide his way. I gently raised the covering from the body of the child. I turned them down to the foot of the crib and he lay there uncovered and naked. He did not wake. Then I went toward the window, softly, quite softly, and I opened it. A breath of icy air glided in like an assassin. It was so cold that I drew aside and the two candles flickered. I remained standing near the window, not daring to turn round as if for fear of seeing what was going on behind me, and feeling the icy air continually across my forehead, my cheeks, my hands, the deadly air which kept streaming in. I stood there a long time. I was not thinking, I was not reflecting. All at once, a little cup caused me to shudder frightfully from head to foot. A shudder that I feel still to the roots of my hair, and with a frantic movement, I abruptly closed both sides of the window and turning round ran over to the crib. He was still asleep, his mouth open, quite naked. I touched his legs. They were icy cold and I covered them up. My heart was suddenly touched, filled with pity, tenderness, love for this poor innocent being that I had wished to kill. I kissed his fine soft hair long and tenderly. Then I went and sat down before the fire. I reflected with amazement, with horror on what I had done, asking myself whence come those tempests of the soul in which a man loses all perspective of things, all command over himself, and acts as in condition of man, intoxication, not knowing where he's going like a vessel in a pariki. The child coughed again, and it gave me heart. Orange, suppose it should die. Oh God, what would become of me? So I rose from my chair to go and look at him, and with a candle in my hand, I leaned over him, seeing him breathing quietly. I felt, and he assured me, and he coughed a third time. It gave me such a shock that I started backward, just as one does at sight of something horrible, and let me candle fall. As I stood erect after picking it up, I noticed that my temples were bathed in perspiration that could fill sweat, which is the result of anguish of soul, and I remained until daylight bending over my son, becoming calm when he remained quiet for some time and filled with atrocious pain when a weak cough came from his mouth. So he awoke with his eyes red, his throat choked, and with an air of suffering. When the woman came in to arrange my room, I sent her at once for a doctor. He came at the end of an hour and said, after examining the child, did he not catch cold? He began to tremble like a person with palsy, and I felt her. No, I do not think so. And then I said, what is the matter? Is it serious? I don't know yet, he replied. I will come again this evening. He came that evening. My son had remained almost all day in a condition of drowsiness, coughing from time to time. During the night, inflammation of the lungs set in. That lasted 10 days. I cannot express what I suffered in those interminable hours that divide morning from night, right from morning. He died. And since that moment, I have not passed 1 hour, not a single hour, without the frightful burning recollection, a gnawing recollection, a memory that seems to wring my heart, hawking in my like a savage beast imprisoned in the depth of my soul. Oh, if I could have gone back. Mr. Puril de la Volte raised his spectacles with a motion that was peculiar to him whenever he finished reading a contract, and the 3 years of the defendant looked at one another without speaking, Paul and motionless. At the end of a minute, the lawyer resumed, the must be destroyed. The other two bent their heads in sign of assent. He lighted a candle carefully, separated the pages containing the damaging confession from those relating to the disposition of money. Then he held them over the candle and threw them into the fireplace, and they watched the white sheets as they burned till they were presently reduced to little crumbling black heaps. And as some words were still visible, white tracting, and the daughter with still the little strokes of the toe of her shoe touched the burning paper, mixing it with the old ashes in the fireplace. Then all three stood there watching it for some time, as if they feared that the destroyed secret might escape from the fireplace. So everyone, the chapter is in here. I hope you all are very well understand the chapter. We will meet to the next class. Thank you, everyone.